So thank you for being here. Mr. Norton seems to be doing a victory tour in the United States of America after his landslide victory at the local government elections. So, from what I gather, he's going to be in Richmond Hill today, and he's going to be meeting with the Guyanese community there. But before he left Guyana, he went to the Essequibo Coast, and as is typical of the APNU AFC, met with a community there, Afro-Guyanese community, and was preaching once again the standard mantra that that community is dispossessed by the PPP and they're being discriminated against. And it's very hard for Afro-Guyanese to start a business in Guyana. So I agree that it's difficult for people to start business, especially if they've not been in the sector before. But if it's difficult now, it was near impossible under the APNU government that we just had to get rid of. Because they sucked the life out of not just large businesses across Guyana, and you talk to the major producers and they will tell you this, but in which almost every sector of the economy saw a decline, and I'm speaking about the non-oil sector. But they also made it very, very difficult for small business to operate, from increasing registration fees, licensing permits, putting taxes on a number of things that small business of necessity have to utilize in advancing their business venture. For example, water and electricity and data and everything else were subjected to taxation that we had to remove the value-added tax. I've always given one example. When to vend from a vehicle, the license used to be $12,500 per annum under the PPP. It went to $65,000 per annum under APNU. And that's the magnitude of the increase for licenses across the board. So I saw them recently, they don't even know what they did in government. And Annette Ferguson asked that we present to Parliament because we say over 200 taxes and fees were increased. And she asked that we present the details there. At the last count I did, it's over 300. It's not even 200. We were shortchanging ourselves by saying 200 taxes and fees were increased in that period. It was very difficult for small business. Money in circulation just dried up. If you talk to people, taxi drivers, almost everyone, and it was very difficult. So he spread this rhetoric, and I wonder what he's going to really say to the people in Queens, because he's going to carry a very different rhetoric there. But I hope he would tell them about how he plans to save $200 billion per annum from cutting corruption. because that's what he said at his press conference. You can save $200 billion per annum by cutting corruption. So I hope that he will tell the people there that. And I hope that he will tell them that the Dutch disease and inflation don't matter in managing an economy, which he recently said. And I hope he would defend or criticize Amanda Walton for saying that Indo-Guyanese are mentally lazy, because the Richmond Hill community is mainly Indo-Guyanese. So I wish him well, but this is what we come to expect. And since I'm talking about the US, so I saw Rickford Burke today posted that someone was trying to dissuade people from going to the meeting. People don't want to go to listen to Norton in Guyana in his support base. Why would anyone in that area even want to attend a meeting with him? So we're not dissuading people, but the comment that I made last week about Rickford Burke and how he's committing a serious criminal act in the United States of America by engaging in lobbying activities without being registered under FARA. It is a jailable offense, not just a fine. And I hope that Guyanese will write the Justice Department, wherever you are, here in Guyana or you live in the US, will write the Justice Department pointing this out, that here is a con man who is wanted in Guyana for extortion, who is engaged in illegalities in the United States of America, and the illegalities are all geared towards raising funds. So you would have heard a lot about this conference. Last week he said, I'm trying to intimidate the congressmen and people from the administration not to attend this diaspora conference. But we don't have those powers to intimidate anyone. But I think what he's worried about is being exposed, because he's profiteering from doing this. These conferences are his way of making money. And I have the proof here. So everyone would have thought that this was an altruistic kind of activity that will be put together for the purpose of engaging the attention of US policymakers and bringing the facts to them, even facts about Afro-Guyanese state, the state of their affairs here in Guyana. But it's not so. Rickford Burke now sends out all these breaking news about who's going to attend, and so he lists everyone, people from White House, and State Department, and every department of the government, and the senators and congressmen. And then quietly he sends out a letter to say, you have to pay $100 to come to this conference. And he's been saying, and he would sterilize who will come to the conference. So some people could be rejected. So I guess the inconvenient ones will be rejected. And then quietly he's been saying to people, you have to pay more if you want your picture taken with a congressman. You'd have to pay $1,000 if you want to get to meet the congressman, etc. But not paid to anyone else, but paid to him and his organization. It is a con. It's a con job. This is what he does in the United States of America. He lives by conning people. And as we've seen here, extortionists too. So I want people, they like to report. He said after my last press conference, he reported me to the police in New York that I threatened him and will send army people to harm him. Nobody wants to harm this clown. But, but now I hope that Guyanese will all report him to the FBI and to the State Department and to the Justice Department for the illegalities he's been committed. And especially those who live abroad, you should write the U.S. government about this. This conference, it has nothing to do with Afro-Guyanese. It's all about, it's a Rockford Burke money-making venture. Now, in the last few days, we have seen quite a bit of activities surrounding some statements that emerged from the Parliament and from the opposition. The People's Progressive Party has given an extension to ExxonMobil for their prospecting of 1 year for the life of their prospecting license that was issued in 2016. So this warranted a front page comment from the Kaichor News. PPP Civics dealings favor ExxonMobil over Guyana. And I don't want to read it to you, but it concludes, and this is what it's all about, a vilification of the PPP for giving this extension, saying we sold out the country, we're in the pocket of Exxon, that it's basically criminal, and it's an indictment of the party and the government. We saw several other articles in many publications about the same matter. Now, as you have seen from the statement that was issued by the Ministry of Natural Resources, it was former President Granger who gave this extension. Nobody questioned until today, why did he have to do this 8 days before President Ali was sworn in and almost 5 months after he had lost the elections? What was the urgency of doing this 8 days before the swearing in of President Ali? Where was the urgency? Because the 1 year extension would only affect the prospecting license when the second renewal period comes up and they have to relinquish 20% of the block. So there was no urgency. Could have been done later. There was no immediacy in the issue. Yet he did it. His biggest priority when this country was struggling to maintain its democratic credentials and its future, because an undemocratic path would have led us down uncharted waters and possibly the destruction of this country. When the country was struggling about this was to resolve that issue. This was his priority. But the fact remains is that the AFC APNU government gave an extension for 1 year. The thing is that, so when this information came out, rather than going quiet, this AFC put out a press release. And this is what they said. But even if the APNU AFC did indeed give Exxon a 1-year extension for COVID-related activities, and they did, why is it now necessary for the PPP to also grant an additional extension for the same reasons, 3 years after the pandemic? Now, we assume that people, when they hold certain positions in government, and especially ministerial role, would read things and understand. But here is it, an entire political party doesn't understand what a high school student would read and understand. There is no second extension. The PPP did not give an additional 1-year extension. The extension of 1 year that Granger gave had consequences in that it shifted the provisions of the prospecting license by 1 year forward. So 2019 was the first renewal period. 2023 was the second renewal period when they had to give up 20% of the block. But because they had the 1-year extension on the prospecting license, the renewal period, the second renewal period, got shifted to 2024. So they saw that it's a shift. Now the renewal period, the second renewal period, was shifted to 2024. So they think it's a different extension. They don't understand that it is the extension that they got in 2020 from Granger that had this consequence. And anybody would understand this. I was tempted to draw here a tiny graph and show Ramjatan, send it over to him. And then he follows, the press release says, the approach of the coalition contrasts with the lay down and take all you want attitude of the PPP. In the same statement that they gave the extension for, where there was no urgency at that time, they then said, oh, this is PPP laying down and Exxon could do whatever they want with them. This is the same party that signed the 2016 agreement and gave the extension. So now, they're still, I can go on. I just want to, at some point in time, I'll do that to show how stupid they are and the arguments are. They made it from all their leaders. I have all of it. They can't even understand what they did. They don't understand what they did. So now suddenly, and then they got the TIGI guy, he got involved too, blaming the PPP for it. Everybody blaming the PPP for it. So what has happened now, effectively, is that the extension, they now shifted it to, the quarterly information that you're supposed to get. The extension was given from March to 2020 to March 2021. And Exxon brought in information. They gave a full report to the ministry as to how their original plan was affected. From 6 rigs down to 4. They could not mobilize 2 of the rigs. They had one of the 4 had to be basically decommissioned or activities, they couldn't continue activities on one of the existing 4. So they demonstrated how COVID affected. The PPP did not give an extension beyond what Granger did. We didn't give any extension beyond what Granger did. It's the Granger's extension that has caused the relinquishment of the 20% to shift from 2023 to 2024. It's as simple as that. There is no second extension. Look. This is after 3 places they mention in their press release that, okay, we gave 1 extension, but why did the PPP have to give a second one in 2023? There's no second extension. We're living with the consequences of their extension. And so I hope that all of the people who are vilifying the PPP, of course you wouldn't expect Kaichur News to do anything of that sort. There was an apology. There was an apology. Because this is, anyhow, let's move on from that. The next point I want to make, so it is, let me go straight to this one. I'm talking about Kaichur News. Last week, they asked me if the $5 million remaining from the GT&T sale of shares, whether that was paid. And I said, I'm sure it was paid, but I have to verify it. So the headline says, government unsure if Chinese company paid off the $5 million owed to GT&T shares. It sold 10 years ago. We're unsure. I said, I'm sure, but we'll verify. Now this is like asking people, do you know Glenn Lal killed someone and was never charged for it at Agricola? Do you know, I'm asking the reporters, and do you know he was involved in backtracking? And if you say no, then I'd say Kaichur News reporters are unsure whether Glenn Lal is a killer. That is the analogy, because you're unsure. Of course, you would probably have to get time to check it out if it's true. But if I put a headline like that, Kaichur News reporters unsure whether Glenn Lal is a killer or a backtracker, then that would be fair reporting too. So the facts are, as I said last week, once again, that when we went out to tender in 2010, it was a public tender, all the newspapers. The highest, we got a single bid in for those 20% shares for $7 million from Rudisa, a subsidiary of Rudisa. That is the Surinamese company. $7 million. We ended up selling the shares for $30 million. And I'm telling you this because I'm coming back to the Marriott in a moment. So we sold the share for $30 million. The public tender One bid, $7 million, although we extended the bid. And $5 million was supposed to be paid. The facts are now that all $30 million has been paid, and because of the court decision, another $2.2 million, so $32.2 million have been paid so far, because the 2.2 is in interest, and they still have to pay some additional interest, several millions dollars more. So it has been fully paid, the entire sales sum, and we have received now interest on some of the outstanding money. That's a fact. And the reason I wanted to talk a bit about that is because, again, the Marriott. A similar situation with Marriott. They have a new thing now called Blunt. So today, this was Marriott hotel sale in the Kite News. This is a full page that they use, Blunt. So I'm going to read it to the people of this country. The selling of Guyana continues under the PPP government. Bharrat Jagdeo, the sale of the Marriott Hotel is in its final stages. Guyanese know little of the hotel's arrival and its life. But now, thanks to Jagdeo, we are here of its sale almost completed. This is how prize assets are passed from hand to hand under the PPP. This is the business he touts, but conceals in secrecy. Guyana's rich assets have become toys in Jagdeo's hands. Now, we went through a public tender for the sale. This is the same Glenn Lal who'd been saying that he knows about some phantom investors who own the Marriott. A total lie. Couldn't prove a single one. He came to a press conference. I said I'd leave this job if he could find a single phantom investor or owner. So he was exposed there. Secondly, we went to public tender. We got two bids, $55 million and $65 million. He said we should sell it for $55 million because that's the better of the, in an editorial, because that's the Guyanese. We went out back to tender again, and this is all in the public domain at these press conferences. You hear? We now have a bid for $90 million. I said to people, we're wrapping up this bid because you have to get the transactional documents, you have to get the investor who has to do due diligence, all of that before the agreement is finalized. Every step of the way, we inform the public. If you go back to all my press conferences, he says this is secret. Now, the man who was advocating first of all was saying it's a white elephant, then saying we should sell it for $55 million. We're selling it for $90 million now, and it is giving away the assets of the country. But this is in today's paper. So this is what we have passing off as journalism. And every single day, it's the same. So I'm not going to go through the other blunts. Every day, apparently, there is one. But I just wanted to say that about these two. I noticed on the oil refinery, Stabrook did an editorial on the 21st, and then made a great suggestion about the refinery, that we should not think about it, that I defended the refinery the last time, and that we should contemplate looking at the creation of strategic reserves. But I recall that is what I spoke of last week. But now suddenly an editorial on August 21st, Monday of this week, who said, even so, if Mr. Jagdeo and his government are so worried about supply chain disruptions, perhaps they could begin looking at other possibilities that could be free of the toxicities inherent in a refinery. For example, they consider the creation of a strategic reserve. Last week, that's what I said we're considering. And now suddenly the editorial says we're so narrow-minded that we now need to consider what I suggested that we are doing already last week. And sometimes I do wonder whether these things. Let me just say that I know there are lots of questions today because people have been calling me a lot, and so I'm going to give you a chance to deal with that. But just to come back to this core point, that the Kaichor News and Glenlal has made ignorance of virtue. You know, we should tell our children, his message, stop going to school. Because if you cannot go to school and be a specialist on everything as Glenlal is, then what's the need to go to school and have this profound understanding of everything? And so it's utter nonsense. And that's why there are lots of things that were written there, and I'm not going to even pay attention to them because they're repetitive. I spoke with some of my colleagues from abroad, economists, etc., and they say to me, why bother with this stupid thing? Nobody pays attention, nobody with any sense reading 3 articles there, and they would understand. The 3 articles get repeated in different fashion all the time, and nobody pays attention to it. I guess but in Guyana's context, we have to continue doing this. I'm going to end here. I'm going to end early today and give you a chance to ask all the questions that you want. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, you got a microphone there? It's working? Why are you laughing? This girl is a wicked something. what are you laughing? Huh? You're afraid of the mic?
Good afternoon, Kimal King Oil Now. I wanted to ask you about the Kanuku block offshore Guyana. Tullow Oil has decided to sell out its stake in the Oranduke block, and having made that decision to exit there, there's been no news on what of its stake in the Kanuku block, because it is...
We have not. The last 2 days ago, I spoke with Vikram Bharrat, and at that time we had not received notification, and they need to notify us because the approval has to be done by the government of Guyana. So up to that point in time, we had not been notified about this. We've been hearing about it, the grapevine, but that has to come through, as we said before, a formal process to us.
Decision to leave the Oranduke block. That's what you didn't hear about?
Yeah.
Okay. There is also, with respect to the Kanuku block, from my analysis of their contract, their time with the block should have come to an end already. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know if the government gave an extension to the holders of the Kanuku block, Repsol and Tullow and so on?
No, there's been no extension. No extension. So if the time, what do you mean the time has come to an end?
So each of the PSAs, you get about 10 years split phases.
Yes.
Early studies and then first phase, second phase.
So
and then that-
the GGMC showed us a timetable. And so that's why I'm saying with the first renewal period and then the second renewal period, the relinquishment, and then the giving up of the entire block after a particular period. So outside of CGX, none of those that we saw at that time from the timetable they gave us would have reached a period when they had to, the entire prospecting license would have been exhausted or expired. So I need to verify that from GGMC because they track that.
Okay.
Marcel Thomas from the Starbuck News. I have two questions, and both, one is on a letter from, both are letters. One is from written by the brother of Sash Saw, Roger
No,
Shaw.
brother, son.
It's his son.
Son, yeah, Roger.
Oh, on behalf of the family, and I
Yes.
guess you would have read that
Yeah,
letter.
yeah,
He's
I saw
saying
the letter.
basically that your take to the grave comments disregard justice for
Yeah,
persons
sure.
who were killed during the period. My questions on that are, one, that when you mentioned that there were persons in the army whose names you couldn't say, does that mean that they were involved in this whole crime spree process in terms of being participant in that? That's one. And two, does the information relate to people who were colluding with criminals? And it goes over again, are those persons in government or in the military, or were in government, were in the military? And overall, what are you, what are
I'm
you,
not getting you. Yes, anyhow.
you
I can get the gist of what you're trying to say.
basically
So
is,
let me,
do you have information, or do you have
Right,
information
so
on
let me
persons who were involved during that period, that were in the military or in government at that time? And should they now not be court-martialed or prosecuted? And you're holding on to this information is like you also being,
yes. So let me go through, yes. So the first question. So I can understand the family. They had this traumatic event. The country suffered this huge trauma. Sashaw was a member of our party. And so it was a loss for everyone, the family, the party, the country. There are lots, in that period, people talk about a crime spree. But what we were dealing with was an insurgency. An insurgency. It wasn't an ordinary crime spree. If you read, first of all, you have to situate yourself in the era and the context of what happened. Now they may have a different view. But if you read UC Kwayana and many of the others, they will tell you about the atmosphere in Buxton when these 5 persons escaped, that the community was subjugated. The community was under siege. That many political operatives, and we have been in the public domain, we spoke about this hundreds of times before, have gone to the community. Raphael Trotman did, Hoy did, a number of individuals did, speaking to people there. So the political cover was given to These 5 persons, they were called freedom fighters. They appeared on television holding a gun and saying they were fighting for freedom. The people who ended up committing the massacres on children and everyone else, and who were subjugating Boston. That was the era, the political cover. You remember Channel 9, and every day you had a running commentary about these people were freedom fighters. That is how they were characterized in that period, the insurgency. So their task, they were criminals. I don't believe they had any intense loyalty to anyone. So they killed conveniently when they felt threatened. But many people thought from the politics at that time that they were creating enough turmoil in the country to dislodge the PPP. And that was the idea. So a lot of things happened in that period. In the leadership of the army and the police, we were duped in many times, duped, or they believed that we were duped, that we did not know, not we were duped, they believed that. And I spoke of it at Roger's funeral, where all of the reports were sterilized. We had people in the community of Buxton who were totally dissatisfied with what was happening in that community. The community lost almost all business activities. People left there, the middle class left. Many people didn't have an option. Many girls in the community were raped because of the political cover that these guys got. And they showed us, we had video footages of all that was taking place. Many of those people today are still alive. Many of them live in those communities. Many of the soldiers who helped to expose the sterilized versions of the documents that came to us, they're still there. Those people need to be protected. They still need to be protected. They put their lives at risk to give us information that ultimately led to either the arrest of these people, or them in engagements with the security forces, they were killed. A lot of those people are still in the system, people who place themselves at personal risk. Now, it had nothing to do with their information on SASO. That matter, you'd recall, the police closed the files. CLL said their file is closed. They charged 2 persons. I think one was Skinny and one Biscuit. The two, I don't remember their right names. But these 2 persons were charged. The police had evidence that they were involved in that. So people were charged. And there was a call for an inquiry, commission of inquiry, but if they've identified the killers, there may be others too, but a lot of people got killed in that period from that gang. And so it had nothing to do with SASO and the SASO affairs. Even up to recently, I think the family got a chance to see the police files. And it might be very painful to the family too. Just recently. But what I said there, had nothing to do with that matter, because that issue was, we had people who were charged for those crimes, that we are convinced, based on the police investigation, that they're the ones who did that. So there are lots of people who we still need to protect in the system, people who put their lives at risk. Now, if you recall, Granger said he will do a COI, and then he ended up only doing the COI for Lindo Creek, because in Lindo Creek, a few people accused the security forces of committing the crime, like killing people, which was false, but he wanted almost to prove that the security forces were involved in criminal activities at every single stage. You recall the infamous statement from Basil Williams to Felix, saying when the massacre took place at Agricola, that you helped us. You helped us by diverting attention. Right? A lot of that is known already. But for APNU to come at this stage, on when Roger had passed away, and then in a statement blame him for what took place at Buxton. That is what they did in their statement that they issued after his passing. That is why it warranted saying something about it. So yeah, we can do the follow-up on that. Yeah.
And following up though, when you said about the persons, the top tier that would have serialized the information, aren't they committing acts of obstruction of justice? And shouldn't they face some kind of...
They're all out now. They're all out. Their whole leadership. You recall that we had to make almost the top 4 persons or 5 persons in the army had to make way for a new chief of staff when I was president. They had no role again in the command structure, and that's when we started making progress by replacing people.
My other question was, oh, I should ask though, with the same take to the grave, would you revisit that at any point?
Which
the stuff that you'll take to the grave, since would you revisit sharing it?
Maybe because there are lots of people you still need to protect, and maybe as time goes on, things will happen.
This one is from former Minister of Natural Resources, Raphael Trotman. It's in today's too.
Oh.
And he says, basically your claim about the criminality of the contract with Exxon gives you the perfect opening to void the 2016 contract and take Exxon back to the table, because any contract formed in any criminal machinations, whatever, can't be taken. So you can't say that it's sanctity of contract.
I read the letter. So now my thing is that, again, Trotman should be, I don't want to be, because Trotman is a bit ill, and I don't want to say all the things that really I should say. But what I said, basically, it was criminal negligence. That's what I was getting at, on his part, because of what he did. When he had advice to the contrary, He rushed off and signed the contract when he should have exercised greater diligence. So it's criminal on his part because of the negligence. He breached all the fiduciary trust. If it was, it almost like malfeasance in public office when you breach fiduciary trust that we place in someone's hands. And you just callously, on a complex contract of this nature, you just, when we were told that he had advice to the contrary, that he just rushed off and concluded it. That was what I said.
So the contract itself is
But he did not represent us. That's what I'm saying. He acted criminally.
I'm asking you now, but the contract itself is legitimate.
We haven't been able to prove that he has benefited personally, but if that could be proven by anyone, then there might be a different case. But I was speaking about his criminal negligence. That's what I was speaking about, clear. And I saw he went on, who haven't forgiven him for some encounter in Parliament that we had. Only God forgives people. He should seek forgiveness from the Maker. Now, my thing is that it's never personal. So if Trotman is listening, I may not get a chance to say this thing. For me, my politics is not personal. So if he believes that I hold ill will because of some speech that he made in Parliament that I don't even remember, that he's wrong. For me, it's all about the politics, not personal. And so you can rest assured I don't have any ill will to him, but personally. But he acted in a criminally negligent manner.
Dr. Jagdeo, on the same letter, given all that you would have said over the years about Trotman's criminal negligence as you described it, would the government be open to launching a full-fledged investigation to understand what were the motivations behind such criminal negligence and to understand why would a cabinet give, the former cabinet give its blessings for the criminal negligence that you would have described over the years?
Yeah, I don't know if evidence, if Kaichur News can come up with some evidence that show that it warrants such an investigation. We don't have any evidence now, but then I'm sure everyone would want to do that.
On the matter of the relinquishment, the opposition, in its letter, in its statement that you have, it called for the release of evidence to show that the government did do its due diligence, starting with the September 2020 quarterly review.
Yeah,
how would you respond
but
to that?
The thing is that it is a diversion. They got caught with their pants down. They got caught with their pants down. They said, oh, you guys gave an extension, and then then suddenly it came out that they gave the extension. So they got caught with their pants down. Instead of gracefully accepting that and killing the issue, they then said, they then dug a deeper hole for themselves by saying, oh, we gave that, but why did you have to give one in 2023 after COVID, another extension for 1 year? Which was nonsense. There was no second extension. When that was exposed, they went back, oh, you're supposed to assess it. Well, we did, but we're not gonna give, we don't have to give evidence to AFC or anyone, the AFC. We did, I just told you about some of the elements of it to show that it did affect them. And we didn't go, although COVID extended, we came out of COVID till 2022 nearly. we did not go beyond the 1 year, March 2021. So we did not extend that period, although COVID lasted longer than the 1 year period, because we believe that in that period, they made some adjustments beyond the last year of the COVID. But in the period between, for the 1 year, there was a work program, and the work program could not be completed because they had real difficulties mobilizing the rigs, 2 of the rigs that should have been working in that year.
Just 2 other questions, Dr. Jagdeo. Last week when you spoke about the refinery matter at the previous
Yes.
press conference, I wasn't exactly clear about the comment you made about the capacity. Did you say, and you can confirm for me, that 1 refinery would be needed at this point in time, or government would consider 1 refinery given our capacity, and another is possible if we get to that 1.2?
No. I said that the way we see it, that will be only 1 refinery if we go down that route. We explore the market, and through a request for proposal, I said that's 1. We got about 11 submissions there. Then we had about another 5 or so came in unsolicited. That whatever happens, if we assess all of these, there could only be 1 refinery, regardless of how many proposals we get. If we decide to go that route, because simultaneously we're exploring the concept of strategic reserves, and that we have to look at the 2 side by side to see if they can solve the same problem or concern that we have. And the concern is about energy security here in Guyana. So if, for example, the strategic reserves, and I went through it, if our oil is told abroad, I don't want to go back through all of that. That's why I was shocked that the Stabroek editorial would say we should consider this, when I actually dealt with it last week, Thursday, and I said, we are considering this. And that is as an alternative to a refinery. So we are looking at both side by side, which serves the country's interests best. But there will not be several refineries. Yes.
Given the capacity. And on the oil blocks auction, has government decided on a firm as yet that you would use to assist you with the evaluation of the bids?
Yeah, I think the same IHS market that has that worked with us on the preparation for the auction, the PSA, the Petroleum Activities Bill. They would be the firm that would help us to evaluate the offers. So we've uploaded on the ministry's page both versions of the PSA, for the deep water and shallow water. I think those are uploaded. I asked them. They were uploaded today. So that's, you can see that there, and then the law is all, will be sent to the bidders. So all have been sent to the bidders already, as promised.
Good afternoon, Trina Williams from Guyana Chronicle. Concerning the reopening of the Rose Hall estate, can you say what it means for the communities in Berbice? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say what this reopening means for the communities in Berbice and how many persons will be or
I'm not hearing you. Yes. We need a proper microphone.
what it means
Oh, the Rose Hall estate, yeah.
and how many persons will be or were hired?
Oh, at Rose Hall, the last figure they gave me was about, I think about 1,300 or something, like 1,300 or 1,100, somewhere around that, yes. And I think it was about 1,700, 1,700 that were terminated, somewhere around that level. So that's what you're asking? Oh, okay, yes. So Berbice, as you know, sugar was the major economic activity in Berbice for the whole county. Sugar's income, or the sugar workers' income, was served as the driving force for the economy, the local economy, because the taxi drivers, the vendors in the stores, those who were selling in the market, almost everything depending on the sugar workers' income. When we had a massive withdrawal of that income, we saw economic activities and joblessness. First, economic activities plunged and the joblessness rate skyrocketed in Berbice. People are losing hope. And so our strategy has been to put more disposable income back in the economy. Here in 3 and 4, these regional economies tend to operate on their own because they have a lot of economic activities and the disposable income. Not so like with Linden or Essequibo or Berbice. You have to almost, government spending has to help to bolster economic activities, private economic activities in these areas to keep them going. So re-employing the sugar workers is part of restoring not just the sugar belt or work jobs for sugar workers, but for the entire economy in Berbice. Whether you live in New Amsterdam, you have a store in New Amsterdam, or in Crabwood Creek, or anywhere else. So that was one of the ways that we started getting more income into that area. Secondly, the part-time job. The part-time job takes about maybe $2 billion into the economy in the region per annum. So suddenly you see a lot more economic activities taking place in those areas. So I guess the strategy is working, and we're looking to diversify into other areas. But it means a lot to the sugar workers too. Many of them couldn't send their family to school. You should look back at some of the heart-wrenching videos that were done by people who lost their jobs, lost everything, couldn't send their kids to school and stuff like that. Just tough for them. And who did it callously.
Kurt Campbell, Newsroom. Just a question for clarity, flowing from Kiana's question on the oil refinery. I'm just really trying to understand, with the fixation on one refinery, what it means for the agreement with the Dominican Republic against all of the private proposals that the government has received.
But that has to be assessed against every other proposal. No, exploration. It's not a done deal on the refinery aspect, and even the other elements of you saw the MOU. Even the other elements, it's all exploration. It's all exploration. Before we go to a full petrochemical industry, we are using gas. We have to have our gas strategy. ready. We spoke of that already. I told you already, we're turning our attention to the gas strategy. So a lot of these are to explore opportunities, but we have not concluded anything because it always has to be competitive. And we're looking for the best deal for the country.
Taking you back to last week also, I wanted clarity on that deep water port. You had said that it isn't like the container
Yes,
deep water port. Are we looking at one of those though?
Yes, the costs are enormous. The locations are being examined. First, we look at New Amsterdam. We had several groups, Dubai Port, an Indian group, etc. The problem in New Amsterdam is the siltation from the river, where we're looking at the mouth of the river. That's where we're thinking about that. And the dredging costs are heavy. So we're still looking at options to do that. But for that port to be built, you have to have, because of the cost, you have to have a number of other infrastructure to go along with it, including a connection to Brazil. Because the stream of benefits now, given the level of our imports, would not be able to justify that kind of expenditure at this point in time. Therefore, you have to add a new stream of benefit. So when you're doing the feasibility study, then it comes out positively. And the stream of benefit could be trade from Brazil. Yes.
Davina Bagat with Kaiser News. Earlier you said that you don't have to prove anything to the AFC on your relinquishment provision by releasing that document.
Yeah.
But are you open to making it public just to ease this tension that is ongoing?
But the
now?
document that we receive is, we knew what the original schedule is, and we saw what the adjustment because of COVID. We know the difficulties. What I'm just told you about the key element of it. The key element of it. This AFC said they know COVID never affected the company. So ask them, how do they know this? What was the original? I told you already, it was to have 6 drilling rigs. Now they could not mobilize 2 because of COVID. Couldn't get it. You ask them, how come they know it didn't affect? And they just talk off the top of their head. So I'm telling you, we saw evidence of how it was affected based on what they planned and how that had to be adjusted. But we did not go beyond the 1 year. Although COVID extended, the COVID measures extended up to 2022, we stuck with that 1 year extension that Granger had given, that was described in the document, March to March.
For me, I know you responded earlier to an article, GT&T shares being paid off and so on. But I had raised a question too regarding Liza 2 being paid off. Can you say whether you were able to confirm Exxon clearing those expenses?
Which expenses?
Confirm.
No, I'm not confirming that. I'm not confirming, and because we dealt with this all. If I gotta look, that is why you have to understand things too. I can't come and educate all the time. The thing is that there is, because of no ring fencing, several projects are being financed from the proceeds. So because several projects are being financed, it affects what would have been an early repayment, like had we ring fenced only around Lisa or 2 projects, we would have paid it off already and we would have been receiving 50% basically of their proceeds. So because of this, every time a new project comes along, it delays, and it's dynamic. It delays the repayment of all of these, the expenditure. It delays it, it just shifts it forward. So that is why it's a dynamic thing. It's not like static. And that is what I'm hoping that people would understand. That in these like financial things, because of the lack of ring fencing in this case, in this particular case, it's difficult to assign, to say, oh, all of the money is gone there. Most of the money are going into financing the new projects now, coming from revenue.
From me, given the likely impact of our new status as a high-income country, we know it's likely to affect the interest rates on loans and so on.
I'm now, yes, what's it?
I was saying, given the likely impact of our new status as a high-income earner, do you think does government see this as a positive title, given that it's likely to impact our interest rates on loans?
So what has happened, we will graduate out of concessional resources. When we were low, like a hippie country, we had very, very concessional resources from almost all the multilateral institutions. But progressively, that pool of concessional resource has been dwindling. And so now we would have to borrow from the ordinary capital resources, not special capital resources of these institutions. So like IDA, we're out of IDA now. So we have to borrow, if we want to borrow, from World Bank resources, not IDA resources anymore. Like at the IDB, they had funds for special operations, and then the ordinary capital. One is concessional, the other one is market-based, based on the cost to the institution of raising the capital. They put on an admin fee and then they on-lend it. So we've just got our last set of loans on the concessional basis from the multilateral institutions. We only have two variable, as I mentioned, two variable interest loans in our entire debt portfolio, and both are to multilateral institutions. What we are finding now, though, is that they're borrowing from the ordinary capital of these institutions, which we'll have to do now. The interest rate sometimes, in most cases now, if we talk about the current situation, will be higher than borrowing from a private commercial bank and from bilateral donors. So with Saudi Arabia, we borrow through a bilateral arrangement. Our interest rate, borrowing through bilateral arrangements, a fraction of what it would be if we had to borrow under the prevailing circumstances with a high income country from the World Bank, because it's variable and it's LIBOR based. And so that is something that we're looking at. So now what we do, we look at bilateral lines of credit, we look at the multilateral financial institutions, we look at private creditors, and then if we borrow, we then assess the conditions on each. The grace period, the maturity of the loan, the interest rates, and then you make a decision. You make a decision on that basis. And we're still getting, but from bilateral resources, we're still getting concessional loans. So for example, the East Coast Road that we borrowed from the Chinese to do the East Coast Road, that road, that would be from the Exim Bank of China, which is a low interest. if we borrow from like a commercial bank in China, like China Development Bank, the interest rates are high there. So this is but we're watching this carefully, every single loan, and as you've seen so far, our loans are a fraction of our capacity to borrow. We don't borrow easily. They have to go through a serious set of analyses, and they're mainly for capital projects. Contrast that with what the opposition leader said, that you need to borrow for social purpose, basically to eat, and we should borrow and give to people. We disagree with that totally.
Just turning back to the document signed by the former president, it appears that the revelation of these documents caught many of the members of the former administration by surprise. What is your take on the fact that the former president signed such a document so close to handing over the reins of office? And do you think he owes the country an explanation as to why this was such a priority and many of his members were unaware?
Yeah, they should ask him that. I don't generally disagree with the tenure, the letter. It could have been done the extension, because if COVID affected activities and then you can demonstrate that, then that's fine. So I'm not going to run him down on the content of the letter, but you're right about the timing and the urgency. He didn't need to do that. A new government could have done it easily, and it could have been done now, because it's actually could be done next year, because no, not next year, because this year is the relinquishment only. Could have been done now. There is no urgency whatsoever. And there are lots of things that sometimes we discover too, that we're in the dark about the justification as to why that was done. So I guess they should ask him, his own party should ask him, rather than trying to stupidly defend something that is indefensible, because they just got caught with it. They made a big issue, and Glenn was all happy, and then suddenly he realized that it's Apnu who did it. Yeah.
He's been waiting for 3 weeks now, and he cannot get to purchase the stocks because the bank told him that they can't get the currency, the U.S. exchange for him. So will the government be willing to intervene now, at least to attempt to regulate the market before it gets worse?
Yeah. Again, you think that governments just make policies on the basis of one businessman tell you? You think a government make policy like that? A businessman tell you he can't get money and stuff like that. I explained last week that what happened is that almost every bank was clearing except in Republic Bank. That Republic Bank had more demand than they had currency. And now some banks had way in a large sums of money, and they didn't have a wait list, and that there's no interbank market. So the market on the whole, when the central bank assesses a market, they have to look at real parameters, variables, not one businessman come and take a drink and tell you something. They got a central bank operates, they're charged with some responsibilities. And therefore, monetary policy is a serious thing. I know for Kaicho knows it may not nothing much, or for Norton. But they got to look at whether the market is in equilibrium. They can't operate on the basis of individual. They operate on the of individual hearsay, on the basis of aggregates. Aggregates. That's what I call macroeconomics, on aggregates. And so they're saying, the central bank is saying to us, on the face of it, there is enough currency in the system. The market is balkanized, so I may not get currency at my bank because my bank has a wait list like Republic Bank or a particular area. But so once the equilibrium, the aggregate where aggregate demand outstrips aggregate supply of foreign currency to the market, the central bank and the government will intervene by selling currency into the system. Will intervene by doing that, by selling currency into the system. But we got to have that assessment done by the technical people. It's a technical issue. It can't be on the basis every week we come and we discuss this, anecdotally. Yes.
Recently, Parliament, sitting, the Agriculture Minister said that the government will continue to pump more money into the sugar industry until it's fully revived again. Does the government have a time frame at the moment as to like by 2027, 2028?
Yeah, we're looking at the key thing in the sugar industry now is to replant the fields with a new variety of cane that is higher yielding. That's a key priority there. They're preparing, they're moving to mechanization, some form of mechanization. I think we have some problem. It might be internal or GP, I don't know. So that is why there's major work. If they get to do this swiftly, the key thing is not just getting the new variety, it's generating enough planting stock to get all the fields with a new variety. What will happen is that we will then we'll be able to achieve that position faster. But that's the biggest priority now, and we're pushing them hard for this to happen. It could be an internal problem. What? Oh my? No, they announced what? No, what they do, they're continuing to prospect all the time, so they're proving their reserves. So to go into the market, I suspect at some point in time they'll move to a stage where they have proven enough reserves to justify a production decision. And when they get to a production decision, they have to then raise the capital to do that. So then that will be the, I wonder what's going on here. You think Norton is out there with a stick? Yes. Right, so that is what they're doing. They're proving reserves. So every time they say we have drilled and we found X ounces of gold or rocks with X amount of gold bearing and stuff, that's proving reserves. That's the stage they're at, as far as I know. Yes. Oh, the contract, because I guess it's not a production, there's no agreement to, like how the others have an agreement, as far as I know, like how OMI had an agreement or all the other agreements where they say And the contract would be standard. It would say that if you're above 10%, you $1,000, gold is above $1,000, the large contracts have to pay 8% royalty rather than 5% royalty. It goes from 5 to 8. That's that. Then they get the tax waivers, a standard. Everything that you see in the other contracts, all the large gold contracts would be the same. No, not a single different condition than what you've seen in any other large-scale gold mining contract. That's the standard regime. So, but they're not in production. Yes, go ahead.
Sections of the public at least about these falling declarations. Can you provide us with an update on the investigations?
The investigation are going on. I'm not part of the investigation. I've been assured that it's going on. I'm not part of it, but I'm hoping soon it would yield results. We don't want. There are lots of people who are actually. Let me tell you a bit more. What's going on? It must be here, right? GPL? I think it's internal. See if they have like Dennis. Check outside. See if you see Norton there. Right. Huh? Oh, it's internal, right? Yeah, it must be. So yes. So I know that the ministry has already notified people, and they're assessing now, even currently, while the investigation is going on, looking at the back years too, because there's several years we have to go back into. You saw from 2017, 2018, big variances between the gold that was exported and the declarations here. So they're going back now, but as of now, the ministry has already notified a lot of the people that the concessions and everything else would be linked to declaration. Yeah, this thing is becoming unbearable.
I saw that
It's upsetting me.
the Natural Resources Ministry has put out a cost recovery update on its website about how it's working closely with the GRA to bring the processes to a close.
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in, there's a statement that the lessons learned from these processes will be adopted and applied for the 21 to 2022 audit. Could you
Yes.
speak to...
So I saw Mr. Norton saying that we are not building local capacity for to do audits, and somehow the government is delinquent in that. And he cited the GRA again. And you heard what I said here. So it's off. Huh? Yeah, they should turn it off, because it could start a fire or something in here. Oh, they're running it on generator now. Yeah. Okay. So yes, yeah, GRA. I said right here that the commissioner can hire as many people he wants. He has the authority to do that. If he can't find the skill here. If he needs 50 people to do the audits, and he goes to the Minister of Finance and say, I can't find the people here, the next day he'll get the approval. So we can't go and lament our fate, etc. If we can't find the skill here, we're prepared to do that. But you recall when we delayed this audit a few months by trying to bring the locals in to do the audit. And I was personally vilified that we're bringing people in who don't have the expertise, etc. And we had to stick to our guns, and we involved the locals in the audit, and it came out well. We're building capacity. Now, what Mr. Norton did, he said that the goal program is goalless. He's disparaging 17,000 people who are studying now through the goal program. That is practically useless, the goal program. That is what he said at the same time when he was talking about GRE, that it's a useless program. 17,000 people on scholarship. He believes it's useless.
So what I want to know is when you intend to start recruitment for the auditor or the next set of jobs, and with respect to the lessons learned from these processes, could you talk about that? I'm particularly interested in understanding why these audits took so long, because it's not a good look given the level of scrutiny that the media has been placing on this process. And it's what the auditors, the local auditors would get up and leave in the middle of these processes. Like, did that interfere?
No. What is, I don't think it's the audit that took a long time, like the last one, because we had a few months and then it got extended slightly. It is the movement from the auditors, then GRA has to do its review, then we have to write Exxon. Exxon has a particular period. They send back their documents to us. We say, again, it's an iterative process. You haven't supplied enough documents. For the biggest category is the one you saw, where they have not supplied adequate documentation. So then it will come back to us. We'll say, all right, but still we're not satisfied. It goes back to them. They send another set of documents until you're satisfied. If they, at the end of it, after several iterations, they can't justify it, then that goes into the column of not accepted. But often it's a back and forth. And that is what takes up a lot of the time. Because so they told me in the first audit that was done under APNU, they had about something like 214 million or over 200 million, not enough documentation. That came down to 11 million when the additional documentation was submitted over the period. Now they're saying they found even more documentation. That's why we don't want to get involved at the political level. We're allowing the technical people to work that through. And we're reluctant to get in and say, all right, accept that or don't accept that. Because then that's a judgment call by a politician and shouldn't happen. It should be done at the technical level. If they say, okay, we can accept this document as a reliable receipt for this expenditure, or we can't accept it. They have conventions that they use. And so it is this going back and forth that takes time, because it's not a straightforward thing.
But when you as a government give out, say, a 3-month contract, and it goes beyond, you have to pay more to those auditors to...
Yes, it does, and it does cost us more when it's extended.
And so with this back and forth all the time, with future audits, you have to incorporate this learning to grant extended contracts now, or do you have safeguards to prevent that?
I don't know how you can shorten that process, that iterative process. You may be able to, by getting more auditors and more robust auditors, etc., or set cutoff dates. But the iterative process is the process that takes the time. And so you may not need the presence of all the auditors when the documents are being shared. So you may not need the presence of all the auditors when the documents are being shared.
Party. We've seen some folks holding placards. We have some organizations protesting for renegotiation. What would be your advice to these folks? We know the government stance. Will you tell us to just pack up these placards and probably go home and just
Yeah.
let us allow to?
I got some people that paying Glenlal, paying them to hold placards. I got a couple of people who just received money from Glenlal and from people abroad who associated with Glenlal. A couple of crooks who were trying to build a shore-based facility, one of them on the East Bank, some Danny, and he tried to falsify the testing, the PSI, and the people caught him and didn't use, this was on the afternoon, and he didn't get through. He made a big hullabaloo in the newspapers, 50 million being invested and all of that. So check that out, and then nothing happened. So he's one of the shock troops for Glenlal now, because I guess he didn't get his shore-based facility rented. So suddenly he hits the oil and gas industry. So they paid a lot of these people. And there's a Cuba Coast. The people said, we collecting money. I said to them, collect the money, because a lot of them are PVP supporters. Collect the money and hold the placard. Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, I've seen something at I think it's Albion, because there was some controversy over people who did not receive a severance on the afternoon were transferred to Albion. I don't know if that's it. It could be that, because that's what I saw in the news cycle, but I've been really busy. But I saw there was some activity there. Yeah, I don't know exactly when they're going to go out with the ad, but you should contact the ministry. Yeah, Jagdeo wasn't sure about that. Trinidad, there, people don't help. They get money when they, huh? For they get a fee. Yeah, they have to come through a competitive process, but you have to have local people involved. Once you come through a competitive process and you have local people involved, then that's fine. With us, we don't. If the Trinidad has the expertise, we're not discriminating against Trinidad. In fact, might have a greater affinity to people from the region, but they have to go through a tendering process. Okay, thank you.